Welcome to Between the Covers. I'm Ann Bocock. My guests are the award-winning and New York Times best-selling mother-son writing team, Charles Todd. Caroline and Charles Todd are best known for their series of novels set in the post-World War I area in England, the Ian Rutledge series.
Thank you very much.
You.
Pleasure to be here.
When you began this journey with Inspector Ian Rutledge 17 books ago, could you envision it would take off like this?
No clue.
Absolutely no clue. We wrote it more for the pleasure of seeing if we could. Had no idea it would be published, much less become a series. It's just amazing.
I think from the very beginning we were interested in doing this as a joint project. It wasn't hers or mine, it was our project. And we were more interested in the opportunity to share it with other people than we were putting whose name goes first, that type of thing, as well as the publisher really recommended going with one name for marketing purposes.
So how does that happen, that you work so, what seems like, effortlessly together?
We never knew how to do collaboration. And so we began with everything being shared, the writing, the research, the travel, and it just seemed to work that way. I know what he knows what I know, and it blends perfectly.
And your books are in chronological order.
Yes.
But you don't have to read them that way. They each
No.
stand alone.
We write each one as if it were a standalone, and that keeps it fresh. We don't get to the point that we're tired of the characters and tired of the storyline.
Just enough where if you're new to the series you can pick it up, but not so much that if you've read the last 5 or 10 that you're digging through all the rehash one more time to get to the meat of the book.
But when we first start writing the book, if we can get the first page and a half, 2 pages, right, the rest of the book writes itself. No outline, nothing to guide you except the characters. But those first, if you've noticed in the books, like the Murder Stone, for example.
Short chapters.
A short chapter that sets the mood and the feeling and where the book might be going. And then from there on out, it's just follow the leader.
I'm surprised that you're not writing towards a very specific destination because the books are so well plotted. I always felt that you almost wrote them backwards.
We don't know who, sometimes we don't know who's going to get killed.
Really?
And sometimes we don't know who's
But I think
the murderer.
That's what makes it successful, because you're not artificially manufacturing
Yes.
how things are going to turn out. You're watching the progression and letting it come to the conclusion that it needs to, and not necessarily the one that you wrote down when you started the whole process.
That takes a lot of confidence as a novelist. Maybe it's a good thing you had those early suspense novels under your
No, I
belt,
don't think they did it as much as I enjoyed those. But the psychological ramifications of people, that's what really makes these books interesting to us. I mean, why would a normal person who had never done anything wrong suddenly decide to kill somebody? And it happens because they're pressed too far. They are in some way intimidated or fearful, or their family or their livelihood is at stake, and they kill.
Now I get to have a senior moment, the tithe barn.
Oh, well, we can't talk about that because it hasn't been finished yet.
I realize that, but I wasn't going into that as much as I was trying to find the specific angle that we were
That's
looking
right.
for. Sometimes you can find, okay, I'm looking for an X, in this case a tithe barn, but you know, that one doesn't work and this one doesn't work, and you know, trying to narrow it down. And that's where we have so much fun in the research.
That's where we can get
We
distracted.
have difficult customers because they're very intelligent people and let us know when we make errors, but it's a pleasure spending the time to learn about the things and to get it right.
Yes.
But we just both enjoy learning, and as a result can wind up with thousands of pages of research and no pages of manuscript, and editors don't like that for some reason.
It happened more frequently than most people knew. We've heard stories about men who came home from the war, took care of everything that they felt it was their duty to deal with, and then they went out into the back garden and shot themselves. It was their way of dealing with something that they couldn't walk away from, couldn't change.
With shell shock or PTSD, first of all, we didn't understand it. Second of all, it was considered cowardice. How do you walk into a small town and say, I'm damaged from the war? You've got both arms, both legs, you haven't breathed gas. Why are you telling me when I've lost my father, my uncle, my two sons? What are you complaining about? Because to us, Rutledge is a live character. He's
Yes.
not some person on a
I
page.
dream about him when
Do
we're
you?
writing the books. You know, it's strange. I mean, here is this man I know so well.
How do you write the dialogue when you're talking about 1914 and make it relevant?
By not trying to go back to a system of speaking that would be a little heavy-going for most readers, but expressing what they want to say in terms that are still very English. And I think that's the important thing.
I think when you're trying to get the voice, we insist on going to the places where we set the books.
So each book means a new trip to the UK.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only do you get to write it off on your taxes, but you get to wander around. We don't go in with notebooks and cameras around our necks and things with the big sign saying, hi, we're here to figure out how to kill somebody in your town. We go in and spend time. I love to go to the center of town when they have the market, or going to the different businesses and shops and talking to people who will talk freely about things that they're really proud of, their cheeses, their breads, their crafts, and things that they're selling. They want to share that, and yet at the same time that gives you a window in on how they speak, how they think.
How did two Americans decide not only are we going to write, but we're going to write books that are based in England?
And why did we go back 100 years?
Exactly, not even contemporary books.
I think World War I was not only a pivotal event in the 20th century. I mean, it foreshadows a lot of the problems we're having right now with the Balkans, with the Middle East, with Africa. But it also changed the world. It made the U.S. a world power. It broke the power of England. It started the breakup of the empire. And so you have in England going on just like in the first episode of Downton Abbey. Everything's lovely and quiet and is going to be that way forever. And then in 1918, soldiers came home, and it was a different country. They had fought for 4 years, 4 bloody years, for a country that no longer existed, for an image of it that no longer existed.
To give you some kind of idea, in the United States, we didn't come in until Wilson's speech in April of 17. And so we weren't there for very long, but we lost right around 230,000 casualties in World War I. England lost 4 million. And if you look at a country of that size and the percentage of the overall population, an entire generation of young men between the ages of 18 and 35 were gone.
That's right.
There was no one for the women to date, to marry, to have children with, to settle down. All of a sudden, women were thrown in completely new roles that they hadn't expected at all coming out of the Victorian era. A lot changed in that country in 4 years.
What I love about the character of Ian is that this is not contemporary, and he has to use his wits and common sense and other tools to solve these incredible stories and the murders. That was, I mean, there was no DNA, there were no cell phones, there is no the forensics.
I mean, they had fingerprints, but they didn't have any way of comparing them. If you committed a crime in Liverpool, the people in London wouldn't be able to go through the thousands of prints to find a match. They didn't have the comparison microscope until 1926, where you could take two bullets, put them side by side to see if the markings were the same.
Were you always a history buff?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. From early childhood, I've always loved it. It's a story. That's what I like about it. History is a story of the human race. It's just fascinating. Somebody asked once if Charles wrote all the battle scenes and I wrote the rest of how the women dressed. But the fact of the matter is I can write as good a battle scene as he can because we've read the same material. But we work at everything as a joint process. And as long as we both know everything that the other person knows, we can understand the characters. We know how we're going to set up the scene, how we're going to change the atmosphere by having tension develop between one character and another.
You know, we said that you write as a team. What we didn't say is you don't even live in the same state.
We can't even work in the same room.
Is
No, I mean,
a lot of email.
Yes, a lot of email. He has a place in my house, and I have a place in his house where I can go and work while he's in another part. It works out very well. You have to look at what's best for the character, not what's best for you as the author. What works for that person.
So in this, it would be Ian takes precedence.
Right. Yes.
You know, I am
That's ultimately
fascinated.
who wins the argument. Is Rutledge wins.